Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. We're here for a July reading wrap up. I can't believe we're at the end of July already, but at the same time, August is my birthday month, so we're all about celebrating me. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about July. July was a weird reading month. I think because I was reading, well, I read one particular book that was quite a large one, and I think that affected my reading for like the rest of the month because it just took me so long to read it. So I've only read 6 books in July, but at the same time, I'm not that mad. Like, it's way less than I typically read, but at the same time, you know, that remember way at the start of the year I did like a reading goals for 2023. I did say that I wanted to be more intentional with my reading and not to make reading a competition, like with myself. And I think July was like the point in which I just let myself do my own thing, and I wasn't really worried about having to read a lot in the month. I read a really big book and I was like sitting with it and deliberately taking my time with it because I wanted to spend more time in the world. So like, I think, sorry, I'm moving around a lot because I'm standing up. I never stand up for reading wrap-ups. Anyway, what else did I want to say? Yeah, so it's because of that. And I think in a way it worked out really well because I feel really happy with my little stack of books, and I'm happy to talk about them because I think most of them I haven't actually spoken about yet. They're in future videos, so buckle in folks. We're gonna talk shit about some books. It's gonna be fun. In terms of genres, I think most of them are fantasy. Actually, yeah, most of them are fantasy except for one. And then another one is like a novella, and it's a fantasy, like literary speculative confusion of a novel, or novella I should say. The rest are just plain like fantasy, which is really fun. It's such a great reading month. Okay. Are we gonna try and do this chronologically? I don't know if I remember if I read them chronologically. Maybe I'll get the literary and like speculative ones out of the way. So I finally read Fight Night by Miriam. If you don't know about me in this book, so I was introduced to this book when I did my Women's Prize for Fiction survey, and this was a prediction of a few people, and it just sounded so freaking cool. So I was like, oh, like I'm gonna read this eventually, and then people in the comments were like, you probably should read it because it's really, really good. So I put it on hold at the library. Now, I don't know when I did that video. I want to say like March. So it took a while. It took a while to get to me, but it did. And oh golly gosh, this was both heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. I have a reading vlog coming out where I talk more about this in detail. I loved it. This book is about this young girl. She's, I think, like 13, 12, 11, like around that very young age. She's a young teen, I want to say, actually. And she gets suspended from school because she punched another student. And when her mum and her grandmother questioned her, she's like, but you taught me that I should like stand up for myself and that I should fight for myself. That's what I did. Like, why are you mad? So she's suspended, and because of that she spends a lot more time with her grandmother Elvira. Grandma Elvira is the star of the show. She is the star of the show. Margaret Atwood blurbed this and it says, "Go Grandma Elvira." That is correct. We love Elvira in this household. She is just so fantastic and wild, and her personality just like bounds off the page. Bounds off the page? Leaps off the page. What the fuck am I saying? She's amazing. And Swiv essentially like looks after her, and Elvira is just trying to continue living her life, but fully knowing that maybe she's reaching the end of it. And I love the conversations surrounding age, surrounding death, family, grief, trauma, love. Like, when I say this book is heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, I know that's very, very contradictory, but this is what this book is, and it's stunning. I don't even know what else. It's like, in terms of plot, nothing really happens. It's just Swiv and her grandma, and Swiv is like recording everything that her grandmother says, and this book is written as though Swiv is writing to someone, and I think that someone is her dad, because her dad abandoned the family. Her mum has a lot of things going on, and again we talk a little bit about trauma, about how that affects not only the one person but the family, and it was just really beautiful. I think Miriam Toews did so wonderful in writing this story, and I cried a little bit at the end. I think you're expected to cry at the end, but I just think Elvira's character, the grandmother, will stay with me for a very long time. Just their relationship, and also just like Elvira's relationship with her own daughter. I loved it. And I loved seeing like the 3 generations of women. I don't know, I just found this to be really, really wonderful, and it makes me want to pick up Miriam Toews again, but I don't know where to start with her books. So if you have a recommendation, please let me know. But yeah, this was gorgeous. Who would I recommend this for? This doesn't even remind me of anything. Does it remind me of anything? If you just enjoy kind of character studies, like character-driven novels, maybe like along the lines of Frederick Buckman, when you have like an older character who's kind of the main character, even though like Swiv is the main character, but it's really Grandma Elvira who is like the center of this story. I would recommend this. I would. However, you know how I love when books play on structure and all that. This one has no dialogue, like there's no quotation marks, there's no like new paragraph when there's dialogue occurring between characters. It's all within the story. So if that annoys you, don't read this, possibly. Okay, but I really, really loved it. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars because I felt that the ending slightly was like a bit rushed, but I loved it. And then the next book that I read, oh, and I borrowed this from the library, as you all know. The next book that I read, and that I also borrowed from the library, was Hex by Jenni Fagan. I keep on calling her Jennifer Hagan. Don't know why. Hex by Jenni Fagan. Oh my god. Can never remember her name. This was a weird one. That's why I was attracted to it when I saw it at the library, and that's why I put it on hold. I don't know how to explain it. It's about time travel. We have a witch from like our time who knows of this woman who gets tried and executed as a witch. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in the UK or Scotland. She gets tried and executed. She was tortured, and then under torture she said that she was a witch. So she was then executed, and I think she might have been one of the first. And this woman's story, I forget the name, I apologize, I had to return the book back to the library. This woman's story has always really moved the other character. So because the other character is a witch, she then like time travels using her spirit. It's like, you know how Doctor Strange does his thing, you know, and he sends his like spirit somewhere else, basically that. So that's what she does, and she meets this woman in her cell and they connect, and it gets really weird, speculative weirdness, and it's really beautiful, and I cried. A lot of the things that are said just kind of like emphasizes how, well, things don't really change sometimes, and the bleakness of that, especially when considering like the positions of women. So yeah, it was just weird, but also comforting in a strange way, but also horrible, because you're like, what the fuck are we doing as a society, as a global collective of humans? What are we doing, you know? So I gave that 4 stars as well, because I just had a good time. It was an interesting time. Then something happens, and then there's crows everywhere, and there's like this really beautiful scene at the end when like she's being executed, and there are all these crows that come to watch, to be like, we're here with you. And these crows are actually like, it's implied that they're like crows or ravens. I'm gonna say crows, that they're implied that it's all like witches. It's all witches familiars who are there being with this woman as she is being executed. Does she get executed? That's a secret I'll never tell. But it was just a really beautiful scene. And then I think I cried at that scene. It was just like, you know, it's that same feeling that I got when I read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. When authors talk about how women come together, it really impacts me. Like, it really, really does. It is something that it hits me, and I am just like rendered in tears, basically. But okay, let's talk about the next one. I'll talk about this one actually because I finally did it. I finally read A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. Standing up doing these videos is so weird. I feel like I should do a little dance. Anyway, A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is, I think, in a vlog that I've already uploaded, if all goes well. Loved it. This is a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. As we all know, I loved The Priory of the Orange Tree with all of my heart. This was absolutely fantastic. Does it need to be this big? Maybe not, but I understand why it is, because Samantha Shannon like just character builds so beautifully. She makes you feel in any way, like in every way, at least in a like at minimum feel connected to at least one character. But she stays with her characters, she develops them, she builds them, you understand their personalities, their flaws, their everything, their ambitions, their goals, and it makes like what happens at the end all the more impactful. I loved it. We get a bit more background about the Priory, we get a bit more background surrounding kind of the different kingdoms in this world. We learn a little bit about the dragons. I wouldn't necessarily say again that the dragons are at the forefront of this like they were with the Priory, but they're there and you find out a little bit more about them. Also, the main point for me is I love how Samantha Shannon writes like casually queer characters just so awesomely. Like they exist, we exist, and it's just so, it's great, and I love that. I think I did talk a little bit about how I'm trying to trying to remember the vlog, that I wish there was a bit more information or just clarity pertaining to the dragons and to the worms and like the whole dreadmount situation, because I felt like I needed to be a bit more convinced. That's really all it was. A shooting star happens, and this shooting star just like magically puts all of the worms and the bad guys to sleep. And I'm like, why? So I feel like maybe I missed it, because this did take me a while, but I did that on purpose because I was so enjoying being in this world and reading these characters. I hope Samantha Shannon continues writing in this world. Like, I really do. Like, this is truly such an incredible epic fantasy, and I love it so much. And it makes me want, I should say, to reread the Priory, just to see the connections. Like, the connections between Priory characters and like Day of Fallen Night characters. I just had such a good time. I obviously gave, did I give this 5 stars or 4.5 stars? I don't recall, but it's a high one. Like, it would be one of my, at least in my top 15 of the year, because it was just so good. It was just so good. Okay, let's talk about the next one. I'll stick within that vlog that I did. I finally read Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. I loved this. This was so good. It was so brilliant. Oh, it was so good. Watch the vlog where I read this book, because like my emotions reading this everywhere. It was just so good. If you don't know, Clytemnestra is a mythological figure in Greek mythology. She's the wife of Agamemnon, who like is the general dude who goes to Troy, you know, but she's also a princess of Sparta, and we love her. Okay, she is she's not a villain. Like, is she a villain? In Greek myth, she's a villain. I would consider her more like an anti-hero. She's fucking awesome. So, I'm sorry. I love this so much. So Clytemnestra, in this book, is so interesting in comparison to the other book that I read about her, which was right here, Electra by Jennifer Saint. So she's Electra's mum, right? And Clytemnestra marries Agamemnon. And in Electra, the portrayal of the marriage is slightly different. So in the beginning of Electra, Agamemnon is charming. You know, he kind of not sweeps her off her feet, but in it kind of does. Like, he kind of sweeps her off her feet. She is in love with him, right? That's the difference. Whereas in this one, that's not the case. So I just thought it was really interesting how two different retellings retell the same story, right? And it kind of makes me want to reread Electra, because I feel like maybe I'm misremembering the portrayal of their relationship. But Clytemnestra in this one is just a badass, and I mean that with my entire chest. She marries Agamemnon because she has to. He is a bastard from the beginning. Like, we hate Agamemnon from the beginning. There is at no point do we think, oh my god, he's just so cute. No, we do not think that at all. He is a dick. A major dick. Okay? But she has to, because women not really able to like say no, and she's essentially forced into it by her father. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation, but Clytemnestra does what she has to do, and through her children she finds, you know, a little semblance of love, but she hates everything. And you find Clytemnestra, like, the way that she processes her emotions is that she doesn't process her emotions very well, and she's constantly worried about being like Agamemnon, like being like her father, that she, in her mind, she's nothing like them, but in actuality she kind of is. She's not like rainbows and sunshine, and she, you know, physically harms her children at least once. So she's like in pain, and it's not, I'm not condoning anything, but like you're put, as the reader, you're put in a position of being like, what you did is fucked, but I can understand your position. It's really strange, but I think that's the point. And it's kind of similar if you've read Medea by Euripides. Kind of similar, like, fuck, that's fucked up, but at the same time, I empathize with your hurt, right? But doesn't really necessarily mean that you condone their actions as a result of the hurt. It's just that it's a fact. It's the context. Clytemnestra is just, it was fascinating to read. I think Clytemnestra is one of like the most fascinating women in Greek mythology, and I'm kind of fixated on her. This ends before she gets killed, because if you've read like Electra, if you've read the myth, you know how Clytemnestra, her end is. This kind of stops before that, which I thought was interesting. I thought was really interesting, and I would like to read why the author decided to do that. I think I can understand why. I just thought it was really fascinating. I'm like, what? I was fully expecting it to end with her death, but instead it kind of ends and you're like, it's like open-ended, but not really. So it's like you insert this as part of the myth, but it ends in the same way. I don't know, it was just so cool. I love myth retellings. I think they're so awesome and so interesting in how there's like the same source material and these authors are going off that and doing their own thing. Sometimes it's like super, you know, true to what the source is. Other times they kind of go off and have a creative license, which I think is cool as well, because it's like creative, like it's like redoing the myths. Like it's just like this cycle of myth creation. I love it. I love it so much. And I can't wait to see what else she writes, because I'm there. I'm there for whatever Costanza Casati writes, because I love the way she writes. I love the way she constructs her characters and like the world that she builds. It's fascinating. If you read Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes and hated it or thought it was kind of trash, read Clytemnestra. Okay, read this. If you want like a recent myth release, read this. Read it. It's just so interesting. But don't read the blurb, because the blurb, I think, does the book a disservice. It's written in like a, you know, I'm a girl boss, hear me roar kind of way. That's not what this book is. And it's also written in second person. I don't understand why the blurb is written like that. I'm sorry. It ain't gonna cut it. It's the blurb's vibe is very different to what's inside. Okay? This was fantastic. I loved it a lot. Again, character driven, no real plot, which, you know, is like me. Let's talk about the next book. Okay. Before you scream at me, I'll have you know I really enjoyed it. We all know I'm a basic bitch, okay? But even I was surprised when I finished this book and I was like, okay. But there is like a caveat to my enjoyment of this, right? I was not going to read this book at all, because it's one of the most hyped books on TikTok. Was not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, literally. But then a very dear friend to me who I love with all my heart, Tiffany, I've talked about her before, she read this and fell in love with it. That is even an understatement of the century. I've never seen her love a book so much. So I was like, she's kind of making me want to read it. And then Emma, who I also love and adore, and who I've also talked about before, read it, and she was having the time of her life. And so I was like, okay, I'll read it. I read it. I went like when we went to a bookshop. If you have been to the Chestnut Tree bookshop in West Footscray, oh my god, you have to go. If you live in Melbourne, go to this bookshop. It also has a cafe. It is immaculate. The vibes are perfect. I love it so much. Go. Anyway, we went there to like hang out, and this book was there. I just purchased it. I was like, I'm gonna read it. Let's do it. So I did, and I annotated it. I had a really good time. I loved it. I loved it. However, I went into this book knowing that Tiff loved it. Em was having a really good time. I kind of went into this being like, I'm gonna also have a really good time. And because I saw some like videos and conversations about Fourth Wing, the author wrote this specifically for people who don't typically read fantasy. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you think that the author said that to get out of some of the criticisms that have been like hurled at her, that's up to you. But I took that on board because, as we all know, I can be a real critical bitch, okay? I struggle with turning off my brain, but when I heard that, it was like I had permission to just be like my teenage self again, to just read and not think about how ridiculous everything was. So that's what I did. And I had a good time. 15-year-old me would have been on the floor frothing for this book, right? And I think that's why I loved it so much. There's a hint of nostalgia when I read this. It feels like fan fiction in a way because, and I say this with like no offense intended, it is like every other fantasy book. There's nothing new that's happening here. Absolutely nothing new, nothing unique, nothing fresh. Everything that happens in this book happens in other books. If you've read even one Sarah J. Maas book, you have read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just want to let you know that that's what happens. And that was my experience of it, right? And I think that's why I was enjoying it so much though, because it reminded me of the fantasy that I have consumed and that I've enjoyed, so that there was that element of like fan fiction, nostalgia, talking to my inner child. Like it was very much that. The writing is fine. Like you're not reading this for incredible writing. You're reading this for the fun, the vibes, and the romance, and maybe the dragons. I was here for the dragons, okay? But also the romance. A tiny bit. I'll get to that. The writing is fine. If you've read, what's that book called? The one that I hated, the series that I read. Oh my god. I read it this year for the Goodreads. Oh my god, why am I looking at my bookshelf? I don't own them. Nerminovic. The Scholomance series. If you've read the Scholomance series, they're practically the same. But this book has dragons in it. And this book is written slightly better than the Scholomance series, okay? Actually, this book is better than the Scholomance series. So if you've read the Scholomance series and loved it, read this. If you've read the Scholomance series and hated it, read this, but fully knowing what I just said, okay? If you don't know what this is about, it's like a military college. It's kind of like a university. They're in there, like they're 20 years old when they get to this university. This world, for some reason, is at war. Well, this country, like this kingdom's at war with another neighboring kingdom. We don't know, but we kind of know. And so there's like this military college people go to. People typically, like families especially, they know from a very young age where they want their child to go. So if you are going to be a scribe, you start learning and training when you're literally a child. I don't know if there's like primary school or high schools in this world, I don't remember. But you'll start training at a very young age. If you want to be a dragon rider, which is like the highest, bestest, top tier level at this military school, you start training when you're literally out of the fucking womb, right? That's what happens. So you have infantry who are just foot soldiers, who are considered like the lowest of the low, which I think is really interesting. And I hope in the next book they talk about that a little bit, because there's like this, it's very blasé, like, oh yeah, the infantry are just like fodder, like they always get killed, like it's not our problem. Like, how is that conducive for like a running society if you're sending most of your young people out to die? Anyway, I just thought that was really funny and really interesting. So you have infantry, you have like the healers, and you have the scribes who like record history, and then you have the dragon riders. Is that what they're called, dragon riders, or are they called something else? No, they're just dragon riders. Okay, part of the riders quadrant of the military school. Violet is our main character, and she is not like other girls, but in a very different way. Okay, listen, I liked her. I thought she was she was funny. She was a bit ridiculous, like most. Again, if you've read Sarah J. Maas, just think of the main characters like Feyre, Aelin, and Bryce, even, like very similar vibe. Violet is really easy to like be part of her like narrative voice. I had a really good time. I had a really good time. She's not like other girls, but not in an overbearing, annoying way. She's not like other girls in the riders quadrant, like as she compares herself to dragon riders because she's been forced to go into dragon riders training when all of her life she's been training for being a scribe. So she is part of the other girls. She is like the other girls in the scribe quadrant, but in the riders quadrant, she's too small, she's too frail, she doesn't know what the is going on. Let's be honest, because she was never taught it. She's had 6 months of training for the dragon riders when everyone starts training at like 2. And so her brother was a dragon rider, and a powerful one at that. Her sister is a dragon rider, and a powerful one at that. And her mum, who's like the commander, is like, no one in my family is a scribe. It's like, bitch, you married a scribe. And you married into your husband's family. Your last name is not your last name, it's your husband's. So scribes have been in your family. Like, I don't understand where she was going with this, which is a bit weird. But she's weird because she, like, you can obviously tell that she fucking loved her husband so much that the thought of her daughter being anything like her husband fucking teared her apart. Not condoning, again, being a terrible mother, but like, you kind of understand it. But she's still a cunt. Sorry. Anyway, so Violet goes to the military college. She surprises everyone, and I forgot about this. There's like, in order to get to like the riders quadrant of the military college, you have to walk across a parapet. So from my understanding, a parapet is like off a bridge. I had to Google what a parapet was because I was so fucking confused. And Tiff was like, no, you're going to be Googling parapets like all the time. Because I thought I was really, really dumb. So a parapet is a low protective wall along the edge of a bridge or a roof. My question is, why couldn't they just walk on the bridge or the roof? Like, I forgot, because if a bridge has fallen or like a roof has fallen, why would the parapet still be up? It wouldn't, because there's no structure like holding it. So why can't they just go on the roof of the bridge and walk across? I really don't understand, and I did not understand that entire part. But Violet slayed, and that was all I was having a real good time. I was like, yes, Violet, you do what you need to do. And she did. She killed it. But then for some reason, the guy behind her has like a hard-on for her in a bad way. Like, he just wants to kill her. Because he was like, you're not like other people. You're going to bring us all down because you're so fragile and weak. Okay. It's not that deep. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so that happens. And then she meets this guy named Xaden. And everyone, for some reason, knows that, oh my God, Xaden wants to kill you. Because Xaden's father and his family were executed by her mother. So that's the enemies to lovers part, okay? I'm being very, like, I have a video coming out about this, I'm pretty sure. So what happens is we have this like military college scenario with like the prospect of riding dragons, but also it's the romance for me. I'm sorry, I was here for Xaden. I was here for him and him alone. He reminded me of Rhysand from Akatar by Sarah J Maas. He, like, literally down to the shadows. If you know, you know. I loved him. I loved him so much, and it reminded me how basic I am for men with tattoos. I'm sorry. I can't help it. So it was just such a good time. I had so much fucking fun. The dragons in this, I love them. But I loved it. Okay? Yeah, I loved it. I think I liked the pacing of like the enemies to lovers, like enemies to friends to lovers. I really enjoyed that. I like that you have a bit of time with them being a couple. I loved the dragons. I had such a great time, and that's all I'm gonna say about it. Like, I feel like I have to justify myself, but I read this for fun. And golly, did I have fun. I've already pre-ordered the sequel. I don't know what else to say. I just felt like I was a teenager again. And I really love that feeling. It made me feel like when I read Sarah J Maas, I don't know why I'm pointing. When I read Sarah J Maas for the first time. That's how it reminded, like it was just so much fun. And I hope as we go along, the world building happens a bit better. And maybe Rebecca Yarros, her writing gets like slightly better, a bit more sophisticated. But at the same time, who cares? I had a great time. I gave it 5 stars. No, I gave it 4.5 stars. But I pre-ordered the sequel. I'm so excited. It's just so fun. It's fun and lighthearted. And I felt like a teenager. I'm not going to say anything else. I feel like I've been talking for a while. Let me get a drink. Yeah, I'm close to 40 minutes, but the next book is a doozy. So we're going to talk about this. Okay, I'm not even going to pick it up yet because I feel like I need to tell you why and like how this book came into my life because it's very important. Okay, I'm giving you context, babes. We all know. I feel like I'm on trial for something. We all know how much I love Nalini Singh, right? Nalini Singh is a paranormal romance writer. I love her. She's written the Guild Hunter series. She's written the Psy Changeling Psy Changeling Trinity series. She's also written a lot of romance novels, like just like plain romance novels. She writes now like some thriller suspense. I've read one of them, really enjoyed it. Nalini Singh is like my author. I know when I pick up a Nalini Singh book that I'm going to have an incredible time. I just love the way that she creates her fantasy worlds and even just like her normal contemporary worlds. I started reading Nalini Singh when I was in high school. If you've known me from high school, you know my obsession with her. It started in high school because that was when the paranormal stuff for me became really big. I mean, you have the Twilight and then you had like the vampire werewolf romances, and then like that's how I was introduced to like fantasy, was through like paranormal romance. So I went the Nalini Singh route. I went, Christine Feehan. I went kind of like those types of authors, but I never ever read a book by J.R. Ward. I was reading Jenna Showalter, but I was not reading J.R. Ward. J.R. Ward started her Black Dagger Brotherhood series in like the early 2000s. So by the time I was in high school, there was a fair few books already out in that series, and I just never like gravitated towards them because it just seemed like an insurmountable mountain of like novels, when in reality it would have been like 5, 6 maybe. Instead I started reading like a 30 book series. But the Nalini Singh books were coming out every year, and like there were like the Guild Hunter novels didn't come out until I was in like VCE or even started uni. The Guild Hunter novels I think began when I was 16, I think. So like I was there when these books were coming out, whereas J.R. Ward already had books, had the series out. And I didn't really know if it was like my vibe, but I always in my head was like, I want to read a J.R. Ward book. I want to read that series. This was me as a teenager, like I want to read them because I was obsessed with paranormal romance back then. But it just never happened. And so I never picked it up. So now as an adult, nearing 30, I was like, I kind of want to still read J.R. Ward. Like I want to see what it's like. I want to see if I would have eaten this up when I was a teenager. And so it was always in the back of my mind, like if I ever find them secondhand, or maybe like start borrowing them from the library, like make this like a project, because there are a fair few right now. You will not believe what happened to me. So a few months ago, I went to an op shop, and the first 8 books of the Black Dagger Brotherhood series by J.R. Ward was on the shelf. No, I lie. The first 6 books were on the shelf. Well, from what I thought was the first 6 books. So I grabbed them for $2 each. And I was like, Mum, this is a sign from the universe that I need to start reading them. Like, this is content, baby. Like, I need to read. So I grabbed them, came home, realized that I was missing the first and third books in the series. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, oh, I'm like, fine, whatever. Like, maybe I'll find it on Scribd, like the first book and the third book on Scribd, or at my library, like it's no big deal. A couple weeks ago, we went back to the same old shop. You'll never guess what was there. The first and third books that I was missing. You can't tell me that that wasn't a sign from the universe. So I got them, and I like started reading them immediately. And by them, I mean the first book in this series. I read Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. I was gonna do a separate video for this, but I don't know. I might for the rest. But I just need to... Okay. What the fuck? I need to rant about this. I gave this 2 stars because I still had a good time reading it. I was like, hate reading it, but in like, you know when something is so bad you can't put it down? That was this book for me. So just really quickly, summary of the book, because I'm ranting. You have the king of the vampires. His name is Wrath, because of course his name is Wrath. And he hates humans and women, right? So you have Wrath, and then you have Elizabeth, who really has no personality, to be honest. She's just there. But she's actually half human, half vampire. Now, in this world, the vampire lore of this world is fucked. It is so stupid. So, in this world, being a vampire, I think, is like some sort of genetic thing, right? Because there comes a point in your life, I don't know when, it's either in your teenagehood or like in your 20s, that you undergo a transition. Now, this transition is what transitions you into being a vampire. So Wrath is king of the vampires because his family has always held like a royal title. It's like the royal family of the vampiric society. But he's also the last pure blood vampire. I still need to understand, I need to continue reading the series because I don't understand what that means. Because every vampire is human. Like they start off human and then they transition to a vampire. So I don't get that yet. And I think maybe because I'm just like not processing it properly. So that's that. Now, the beginning of this book starts off with this vampire named Darius, who is a part of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. Now, the Black Dagger Brotherhood is the warrior class of vampire society that Wrath is also a part of, but technically this class, like this brotherhood, protects the king, but also protects civilian vampires, because there are civilian vampires who are not warriors. They're just like normal vamps, just like chilling. And Darius is one of these members of the Brotherhood, and he says to Wrath, basically, he's like, Wrath, I've known you for like, 200 years, but I have a daughter. And Wrath's like, what? Darius is like, yeah, I have a daughter. Her mother was human, and I don't know, like, full human, no genetic dispositions to being a vamp. I guess that's what they mean by pure blood. Her mother was a human. I'm a vampire, obviously. I was hoping she wouldn't transition, but just in case she does, she needs your blood. Can you please take care of her when she transitions? Because only with your blood will she have a 100% success of coming out of the transition. Wrath literally is like, I would rather eat glass, and like walks off. Because he has his own trauma, and instead of seeing a vampire therapist, he just like holds it all in and is a cunt. So Darius is like, well, shit, what am I going to do now? But Darius dies. He explodes, literally. Which, again, vampire lore, quite confused as to how easy it is to kill vampires in this. I don't know. It's like you just, cut off their head and that's it? Because I've read other books, like Guild Hunter series, for instance, that if a vampire gets blown up, there are still pieces of him everywhere. They can regenerate. Like in the Guild Hunter series, you need to cut vampires up into tiny little pieces and then burn them to ash and make sure they've been burnt to ash, and then like spread the ashes or like bury the ash. It's something, because they would need just like a fragment and they can regenerate. It might take them hundreds of years, but they will come back alive. This one is just like, nah, a normal bomb is fine. Like, what? Anyway, so stupid. So because Darius dies, Wrath gets a letter from Darius as part of his will that's been passed on to Fritz, who is Darius's butler. Basically saying, can you take care of Beth? This is her address. Now, what do you think Wrath does? What do you think he does? Instead of, I don't know, being normal, he finds Beth's house and Beth is sleeping. And he stares at her through her sliding door. And she's on the ground floor. That's really important. She's on the ground floor, so like her backyard is like very easy to get into. So he's like literally just staring at her, being a creep. And her cat starts going crazy because cats love vampires in this world. Vampires purr in this world. Did you know that? Vampires purr. How great is that? So much fun. So Beth wakes up thinking, what the fuck is going on? She sees this random gigantic man staring at her through her sliding door window. She obviously screams and starts like running away from the sliding glass door. And Wrath, instead of like leaving, he unlocks the sliding door, because with his mental vampiric powers he can do that. And he like walks inside of her house, and she's like screaming and trying to run, but then she falls and bashes her head. And then he's like, that wasn't smooth. He picks her up, removes the memories of the night, and like tucks her in back to sleep. First of all, a lot of issues there. But he didn't know Beth, on her way back from work, like to go home, gets assaulted and nearly raped by these randos. So she's traumatized. She's going through it. And so seeing that, it just like fucked with her mind. But she doesn't really remember it. She thinks it's a dream. Kind of. Then she goes back to work the next day. the explosion has hit the news, so she's there, and we get introduced to a detective named Butch. And we'll talk about the names in a second. Butch knows that something's up, but instead of being, I don't know, an empathetic individual and like a normal fucking person, like, mind you, he's supposed to be a police detective. And also Butch complains like the entire book about how he's being brought up on like police brutality charges. I know. We'll get there as well. It's tough. So instead of being a normal fucking human, he like kind of forces her into telling him what happened. Butch is really weird because like she's a victim of a crime and she's going through it, and he is just like constantly talking about how hot she is, and he then at one point, like, she doesn't want to be alone, so she calls him up to go to dinner, but platonically, like, she's not interested, and also she's traumatized because the night before she nearly got, and he kisses her. He just like grabs her head and kisses her. Anyway, so that's all happening, and then like Wrath is like trying to figure out like who killed Darius and what's going on there. Then he's like, oh, I should probably go back and reintroduce myself. So what does he do? Instead of knocking on the fucking door, he goes back to the sliding door. And Beth is like, oh my god, what the fuck? A criminal. But then he unlocks the door, he like walks in. And Beth's monologue is like, I need to scream, I need to run. But there's something about him. So they have sex. And then the story starts, like, properly. So they're now in a relationship, kind of. Butch sees him like loitering near Beth's front door and is like, who the fuck are you? And he arrests him, but then Wrath nearly kills him. And then Beth, that scene is so weird because Butch arrests Wrath at Beth's house. Beth has no car, right? Butch puts Wrath into his car, closes the door, gets in, and drives to the fucking police station. How the fuck did Beth get from her place to the police station in the same time it took Butch in a car to drive from Beth's place to the police station? It doesn't explain. Like, you could just say that she was running faster than usual or something, but we don't get anything from Beth's perspective in that entire scene. It was so weird. And then Butch is like nearly dead because Wrath can't control his wrath. And she's like to Butch, I'm really sorry, but I need to go with him. I'm sorry, I'll explain. Because she's going through this transition, so she needs him. So they go back to Wrath's place, which is Darius's place, which is technically Beth's place. Anyway. And like, things happen. She meets the rest of the brothers of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. And like, eventually her and Wrath get married. There's also the villains of this story called the Lessers, who are part of the Lessening Society, who are vampire slayers. But they're vampire slayers only because they have committed themselves to an entity called the Omega, who is essentially like the bad god. Like a devil-ish type. Not really even a devil. Just like a bad entity. And he's like this supernatural entity. And in order to become a lesser, you have to like give him your heart. And which is like where in this world your soul is. but you get powers. And like you have to hunt vampires. The vampires were created by this woman, this entity I should say, called the Virgin Scribe, or the Scribe Virgin. Scribe Virgin? What is it called? There's Virgin. There is Virgin inside of the name. The Scribe Virgin. She's a mystical force who is counselor to the king, as well as the keeper of vampire archives and the dispenser of privileges. She exists in a non-temporal realm and has extensive powers, capable of a single act of creation which she expended to bring the vampires into existence. We don't know why. She just felt like it, which good on her. Anyway, she's a Scribe Virgin, this really important being that they worship and revere, and she's like this huge, important part of the, you know, society of vampires. Guess what her name is? The Scribe Virgin. Like, you could have just kept her as the Scribe Virgin because she is this entity, but her name is Annalise. Anyway, I don't know why that really annoyed me, but it annoyed me. So you have like that happening in the background. But let's talk about the names, okay? I'm going to end this rant of this book. Don't read it. It's not good. But if you want to have a great time hate reading something, I recommend it. I am reading this entire series. Watch me. Watch me. I'm going to keep you updated because I need to know what happens. I need to know what happens. I need to know what happens. If you've read the Torpedo Ink series by Christine Fagan, it's basically the same. Just instead of like humans with some like low-key psychic powers, you have vampires. Anyway, the Black Dagger Brotherhood. Brotherhood full of like warrior vampires. They all hate women. Is that supposed to be sexy? Is the fact that these men hate women a sexy thing? It's a question to romance authors out there. Is that a sexy thing? I don't find it sexy. I find it disgusting. But the names of these brothers. So we have Wrath, right? It's Wrath. And we had Darius, but Darius is dead, supposedly. At the end, he becomes resurrected. Interesting, huh? And then we have Torment with a H. Torment. Torment. We then have, what's his other dude? Oh, Rage with a H. R-H-A-G-E. Rage. That makes me filled with rage. Okay. What else do we have? We have, Fury. P-H-U-R-Y. Fury. The fuck. We then have Zadist with a Z. Z-S-A-D-I-S-T. Zadist. Isn't that a great name? That's just so great, isn't it? And then we have, who else do we have? I feel like there's more. I do know from like later on in the series, we have Agony with a H. We have Murder with a H. We have Destroyer. You guessed it. With a H. My question is to J.R. Ward. Why? Why? What's with the names? They aren't cool. They aren't sexy. It's just plain weird and I hate it. Also, you have these big dudes who are manly men and they're vampires and their name is, you know, Torment with a H. The way that they speak to each other is so fucking stupid. It doesn't make sense and I don't understand. Does J.R. Ward know how people talk to each other? Has she ever heard men speak to each other? Like, it's so horrible that you have to laugh. Where's the book? First of all, let's just talk about this at the beginning. In the beginning, you have Darius talking to Torment. And Torment is telling Darius, like, why the fuck are you going to ask Wrath to look after your daughter? Like, he's like the worst person to ask. He's atrocious to humans, especially to women. Darius is like, no, it's all good. So before Wrath like comes to the table, Torment sees him. So this is what Torment says. "Shit, here he comes," Torment muttered. He tossed back his scotch, swallowing it whole because he's a man. "No offense, but I'm outie." "No offense, but I'm outie." This is not a conversation I need to be part of. No offense, but I'm outie. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that language? And there was this other one where you have, I think it was like one of the, I don't know. What's his name? Oh my god, it's Vicious with a H. I forgot Vicious. So Vicious is talking to Butch because they've become friends, and the way that these vampires speak to each other is just written horribly. But this is a dialogue between Butch and Vicious. So Butch says to Vicious, "V, yeah, what's doing with the tats?" "I didn't pester you about your curse, cop." Vicious put the arm away. "If I'm not up by 8, wake me. True? Yeah, true." Butch closed his eyes. Now, throughout this book, they're always listening to rap music. I kind of find this low-key problematic. Not low-key, like high-key problematic. I think J.R. Ward is writing these very white European vampires with kind of like AAVE kind of in that way. Like, she thinks this is cool because it's her understanding of like the rap culture, and it just is ridiculous because it's horribly written. It's so bad. It's so bad. I don't understand how this is like a best-selling series. Like, I'm really terrified to continue, but also I can't wait to continue. The next book is about rage. Oh, also you have one of them, Sadist, who Wrath says to Beth, "Never be alone with Zadist." Because he might just, slip and accidentally fucking kill you? And like, how is this? Anyway, that's my, I'm stopping. I'm stopping because I have to stop. I have to stop. But just know that I'm going to continue reading these and give you all the updates. You're welcome. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I apologize that I ranted for so long, but that's what you get. When I'm standing up, I'm feeling like I need to talk more. I need to like walk around. It's really fun. It's so fun. Is it fun? I don't know. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give us a like. Tell me what you read this month. Any hits, any misses. And I will see you next week. Take care, friends, and happy reading. Bye.